Hi Siddharth, welcome to Cinema Express. And today we'll be chatting about a bunch of cool stuff that Roy Kapur Films has been doing on the web. And I have to begin with the Rocket Boys, which is getting raved from all quarters. And I was a bit apprehensive, initially when the idea had come out. I was wondering, if stories of scientists would translate that well. And the few attempts we've done in Hindi cinema haven't exactly clicked. But you guys have captured that time, that the enthusiasm, also the temperament, also the tonality of the show clicks very well. Was it important for you to not dumb down and to really capture the essence of these two people?
It was very important, you're right. And that's something that, Nikhil, Abhay, the team at Sony and us were very, very clear about from the start, that if we were going to be portraying these two, iconic and legendary figures and showing them for the men that they were, we really couldn't show them to be doing science expositions when they were actually, they'd already done their doctorate, their doctorates by the time we meet them. So it was very important, and I think we got the full support of the platform as well in that. I will give a lot of credit to Sony for the fact that they wanted us to be as authentic as we could possibly be. And then, of course, after all the research that Abhay did, he was able to incorporate the dialogue that dealt with science in a way that was entertaining and engaging, but at the same time, he did not have to dumb it down.
There are two lovely production decisions that I also admired. First, to keep so much of Hindi and Gujarati and Parsi, the mix of languages. At the same time, also keep the English alive, because these are Cambridge returned brats in their 30s. They'll obviously be speaking in a tongue that we often don't hear in the cinema for obvious translation reasons. You have kept a good amount of English intact, especially for Homie's character. And also to do it at this scale, there's the VFX is very minimal. There's so much of, live shooting, and these places had to be dressed up. I initially thought the IISc building was VFX, but then I realized, okay, it's a real place. So tell us about just backing backing the makers with these two things, the language and also just the live action and the production.
So again, these were decisions that were taken very early in the process, that we really wanted the language to be the spoken language of that time. And because it has always been jarring when we hear characters who would not normally be speaking in a particular language speaking in it. So, we wanted it to be organically the way that we Indians speak. We use a little mix of, Hindi, English and probably a local language. And that's really what we made sure that the characters did too. And I'm so glad that has actually sort of touched a chord, because you don't see that happen very often in cinema or in television. Again, with the costumes, with the production design, the goal was authenticity, while still making sure that we were being entertaining and being engaging in the way that we presented the characters. So that's a fine line. And I think that's a line that Abhay Pannu as a director really is able to straddle so beautifully. He makes something real and authentic and believable, and at the same time makes it dramatic and engaging and compelling.
I'm very curious, did you guys make the budget? Did it go overboard? Because you guys really stick through the story over 2 decades and so much happening. There are 2 big set pieces at Trombay and later at the launch that happens in the south. It looks gorgeous. And, what was the budgetary journey?
And there was COVID.
Yes, there were COVID. Yeah. How did you guys manage? You guys, I'm sure plans would have gone back and forth.
Plans did go back and forth, but we were really supported by the folks at Sony Live. So both the team at MA and us at Roy Kapur Films felt that support all the way through, because it's clear when, the platform really believes in a show and they back it the way that they did, that we were able to, sort of execute based on the vision that we had right at the start. But I will tell you that we pretty much stuck within the ballpark of where we started out as on a budget. So all credit to the production team for being able to achieve that.
Right. What was the toughest gig to pull off for this film? Maybe one schedule or a particular, let's say, scene or sequence?
So Abhay would be best placed to answer that, because he was the one. He was the general on the ground leading his troops into battle. Right. But I think the long sequences of long shots at parties, where you have multiple, you've got so much going on. You've got camera movement, you've got junior artists, you've got sequencing of entries and exits, etc.
Yes.
Those I think were very challenging sequences, but between Nikhil and Abhay, they really were able to sort of execute them beautifully.
Right. I've never seen a Parsi wedding on screen. It was lovely. The one scene.
It was refreshing, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah. I was initially like, okay, is this a Christian wedding? Is this a Hindu? Oh, and then I was like, okay, it's a Parsi wedding. Lovely. So now tell me this, one keynote throughout the show is these bright minds pitching eccentric projects to slightly nervous but enthusiastic people in park. And that's something I'm sure you, Ronnie, people who led the sort of indie revolution that happened from the mid 2000s to onward to the digital age. That's a situation you obviously would connect with at a smaller level. Where you have these beautiful projects that people are excited about, but there's a lot of concerns that you have to checks that you have to do before greenlighting someone. What is your general mind space when something very exciting comes, but it also seems financially challenging?
You couldn't have put it better, actually. And honestly, it's not a metaphor that I ever thought of now. But now that you mentioned it, you're quite right. People pitching ideas at the birth of India's independence when we were such a fledgling country, to even imagine having a space program or having a nuclear program when so many millions of our countrymen were still living in poverty. These are really audacious ideas, but they were ideas that actually helped lead us into a brighter future and helped us achieve like sort of development at scale.
Right.
Similarly, as you said, I think in any creative enterprise, it's so important to have your ear to the ground and be listening to younger talent that's just bubbling up to the surface, because the ideas that they have tend to be the most out of left field and the purest and the ones that might create the maximum impact, because they're not jaded by convention, they're not jaded by having been through a system already that has taught them to think in a certain way. And that's something that we try to do all through. I mean, just speaking for Ronnie as well, if I can take the liberty to do so, it's something he's always tried to do in the way that he thinks, many steps ahead of the curve. And at UTV, that really was the culture in those early years, to be able to tell stories differently and really make a mark with content that was as differentiated as possible. And that's what we're trying to do at Roy Kapur Films as well.
You also had a success with Aranak before this. Globally, it did very well. And I know Netflix, Sony Live, they don't put out numbers, but I'm sure someone is looking at the data, analyzing it. I want to know from your perspective, what do you think are the important viewer trends and viewer habits that have evolved in the last 4 years on online?
So I mean, the show did really, really well for us. It was in the global top 10 in the first week of launch, really, at Netflix, and that was like in the non-English language shows worldwide, which was quite an achievement to be up there on that list with Money Heist and Squid Game and shows that we know and loved, around the world. I think when it comes to stories, people are looking for stories that they've not seen before. They're looking for characters that they've not encountered before. So even a cop like Kasturi Dogra, she's a female cop in a pretty tough male world, trying to make her mark while at the same time trying to be a good mother and a good wife and a good daughter-in-law and juggle all these roles simultaneously. So that's a character that Charudat Acharya really created from someone he met when he was was visiting a hill station on a holiday. And the fact that he was able to talk to his wife about household things and then go out and start, sort of conducting a pretty thorough investigation of a pickpocket was pretty amazing. And that's when you got the inspiration. So it's characters like that you've not seen before, or a Vikram, Sarabhai and Homi Baba, who you've seen on postage stamps and you've seen, sort of commemorated with statues of them, at various places, but never really known who these people are. When an audience, I think, is going to be spending hours of their time with these characters, they really want them to be interesting, different, either inspiring or so deliciously antagonistic that you can really enjoy them. And that I think in the series space is very important. Great characters.
Right. Because I've been looking at your upcoming slate, and I realized that there's a predilection for a lot of content that draws on non-fiction or factual stories or histories. You have a Matka King series coming up. There's Pipa the film. There's a book adaptation. What is your general approach when you're doing factual stories? And because, like you mentioned earlier, that people are looking for these to be much more detailed now, and the sort of fast-talking, informative style that Hollywood once established. I think India, people are finally picking on that. What is your general approach to adapting history and factual stories now and making them entertaining?
That's a great question. I think when we're adapting factual stories, we, number one, try to be as true to the source material as possible and to real events as we can. we definitely do ensure that we dramatize them in a way that is compelling and engaging and entertaining without compromising on the authenticity. That's really the balance that we try to that we try to strike. Even in a film like Dangal, the Fogart family was very closely involved in talking to us about what they went through and made sure that we try to draw from their experiences. But sometimes what you do is that you condense time, or you let an event maybe like sort of assume more significance than even the real people realize it had in their lives, because you see something from the outside when you realize that was a dramatic moment that really altered the course of events. So those are the dramatic interpretations that we give to the material. But authenticity is very important, because when you are telling real stories, then it is important to be as close to the truth as you can be.
What's the stage the Anarchy adaptation is at? I'm very excited for that.
It's
And
it,
what's
it's in
happening?
development right now, and we're talking to various partners internationally. It's a very ambitious project to set up, but if anyone tells it, I do believe it should be us telling our story. It's important, to not have someone else do it, and but we should do it in the right way. So it's a huge responsibility to tell the story of the arc of the East India Company and its time in India. It's quite a sprawling, quite a sprawling epic drama with a lot of action and great characters. So it will take the time it takes to develop, but I think it'll be worth the wait.
Right. And it takes no prisoners also, that book. So I'm very intrigued. Like, you usually are a little edgy when we're doing history in that sense. I'm sure you'll be going all out with that. Yeah.
I think the way that William Dalrymple has been able to write those characters just lends them to, you imagine them visually immediately. They leap off the page at you, and they like sort of come alive. So he's done a lot of the work for us. I think now it's about really taking his great material and adapting it into a series format.
Is he involved? Is he involved actively with the development?
He will absolutely be involved in the development, and he will be a very close consultant on the project as well.
Right. All right. So that I tried looking this up in your older interviews, but I haven't found an answer to these. Who are your production heroes or producing heroes? Maybe from the West. If not one person, then maybe a model or a movement that happened. If you could share with us.
Again, a really good question. I think Louis Mayer and Irving Thalberg in the early years of MGM were really people to, they were creating an industry out of nothing. And they really built those huge movie studios that were producing dozens of movies every year. The mind just boggles at how they did it. But the fact that Irving Thalberg, passed away when he was 37, and the highest honor that's given to a producer really is the Irving Thalberg Award at the Academy. You can just imagine the amount of work that he fit into his years on Earth. I've read up on him a lot. I've read a couple of books by him. There's a Scott Fitzgerald book on him as well, which is like sort of modeled on. So I've always felt that Thalberg was one person from the West that I really looked up to. And in India, I mean, from GP Sippy to Raj Kapoor, these are all producers who've always taken big bets, swung for the fences, and of course Ronnie. He's someone I've had the opportunity to work closely with and seen him at close quarters. These are the sort of people that one really gives a lot of props to, because they've always taken really bold decisions. And I think in creativity, boldness is everything.
That tell me this, when the OTT revolution took off in India, I think the first 2 years, I think 2018 onwards, I think a lot of the excitement was also the kind of political freedom that was afforded to these stories that, that didn't exist. And, there was a lot of noise that happened about that, with a bunch of them. I have sensed, and people have sensed, a general drawing back, for platforms in the last couple of years. Do you agree with this? Do you think people are a little edgy about taking very hardcore political stories that speak to their times right now?
Yes, they are. I think we're living in a very polarized world right now, whether it's in India or in the US or in so many countries around the world. Social media has led to everyone, having an opinion, and that opinion is magnified many times over, because of the fact that there is a whole media industry that feeds on opinion and feeds on strong opinion rather than more moderated opinion. And unfortunately, the entertainment industry tends to be the lowest hanging fruit, where all the ills of society are like sort of pinned on us, and the whole moral and ethical like sort of obligation of ensuring that society is the best reflection of itself is put on entertainment. Rather than making changes to society, we tend to think, let's make changes to the entertainment and then feel good about society. So that I think is unfortunately an imposition that we have to live with. And yes, you're right. There is a reticence today to taking on anything that could be construed as being something that might cause a controversy.
It's a strange time because also for you guys, because there's success happening on OTT, but at the same time, the theatrical life has been still very in a toss, and we recover and then we go back and we recover and then we go back. What's your mind space now? What are you thinking? Theaters are of course operational, but it's not performing as it should, and you have some big productions in the feature film space also waiting up. What are your feelings about the state of theaters right now?
I would look at this in short term and long term. In the short term, it definitely is a time of flux. There's no doubt about it. It's a hard time for people to take greenlighting decisions on theatrical projects because it is so uncertain right now. And one can't blame everyone for just waiting and watching at this point of time to see where things will land. But I'm long term very optimistic about the theatrical business. I think it's not going anywhere. It's here to stay and always has been. The kinds of movies that people go to watch in the cinemas, I think, will undergo a change. And I think that's a change that we as content creators need to be very in tune with. We have the luxury today of having a very viable non-theatrical platform also to exhibit our movies. Right. And therefore, depending on the genre and depending on the content, I think we need to figure out which of our movies are theatrical movies and which ones are not, and really develop them accordingly. But I think if you had to ask me in a nutshell, I'm very bullish about the theatrical experience overall.
Anything else you'd like to shine a light on? Something you're excited for, in the coming year?
We've got season 2s of both these shows, Aranyak and Rocket Boys. We've got Pippa, which will release later this year. We've got Wo Ladki Hai Kahan that will also release later this year. There are lots of other films and series that are in development at this point of time. And we'll keep making announcements about those as we go along.
What sort of a pitching model that you have in space? How do young writers approach Roy Kapur films now, and how organized it is, and what are the levels they have to go through?
We've got a team that's out there talking to everyone who comes in the door, or at least trying to. We've got an email ID that we can send to you later, where we accept submissions. We try to sift through all the material that comes our way. It's not always easy, I will admit. And I'm sure that there's a lot of great material that falls through the cracks purely because of lack of resources to be able to go through everything that comes into us. But we all try to be as responsive as possible because number one, it's just a respectful thing to do with creative people where you give them a hearing. Number two, you never know when the next great idea is going to come from. So you have to keep your ear to the ground.
When are you rolling with season 2, Rocket Boys? Do you have it in mind?
Well, we've already shot season 2, so we shot both seasons simultaneously, and now it's really a discussion that we'll have with Sony Live about when they would like to go ahead with the second season. But I think everyone's just really high on the success of the first one right now.
Right, but we can expect this year. Can we expect this year itself?
Yes.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Siddharth. A lovely chat. All the best for all your upcoming projects.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for talking to us.
Take care.